Good evening. When the Rhodesian government declared the unilateral declaration of independence from the British, you need to understand that it was white people declaring independence from other fellow white people. Why is it key and important in understanding our path towards attaining freedom in Zimbabwe? I want to highlight something that is not always racism at play, and I want to highlight some of the weaknesses of the British Empire that you and I need to tackle if we indeed want to be free. For if you follow my videos, you will come to a realization that we have concluded and recognized that the British Empire and Washington are at the apex of the problem of oppressing Zimbabweans. In as much as ZANU-PF is oppressing us, but that which gives power and dominance to ZANU-PF is actually the Americans and the British. Now, therefore, the Smith government made a good decision by recognizing that they can no longer pay tribute to the throne because the throne was oppressive even to them. So they declared their own independence and they were slapped with sanctions. To their credit, ZANU-PF did something similar, which is giving black people their land back, and they were slapped with sanctions for that. That's the reason why Zimbabwe is in sanctions. It's all about the land. It's got nothing to do with human rights. America and Britain, trust me, they don't care about human rights violations of black people. If they did care, they would also care about the human rights violations in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they will not allow Apple to buy or Tesla to buy materials that they use to make their Model C cars and their iPhones. But they are happy to use iPhones that come from the oppression in the Congo. So don't tell me about human rights abuse. They don't care about human rights. They care about power. The Smith government understood that. And they had the unilateral declaration of independence and moved on with Rhodesia. Slapped with sanctions, but they found a way of sanction busting. And unfortunately, they were unable to recognize that in order to successfully move forward, they needed to incorporate the black majority in their economic plan. By excluding black people, that is what led to Joshua Mqabo Nkomo to start the ANC in Zimbabwe, which later led on to a war. An unnecessary war that would have avoided if the Rhodesian government had recognized the rights of the black majority and included them in politics and also economically. In that way, Zimbabwe would be a powerhouse right now in Africa and even in global politics, ruled by both blacks and white progressives who care about their country of birth, who want to have a home base where they can dominate even in global politics and in global business. What I need right now is actually brave white Zimbabweans, be they be in Zimbabwe, in Britain, Europe, or in Australia or New Zealand, who recognize that just like the olden unilateral declaration of independence, just because they are white, they cannot think that they can assimilate in British society, in Australian society, and just succeed because they are white. They will find hecklers and find a lot of troubles there. And remember that they actually do have a country, but in the country where they are coming from, they had a war with the natives. A time for greatness or to make great decisions has come. For Zimbabwe to get ahead, the black majority need to recognize that there is also a white minority which is part and parcel of the country. Whether you like them or do not like them is not the point. The point is Zimbabwe is their country too. It's their birthright and they have got all the right to claim it. Whether someone is a colored Zimbabwean, or is a white Zimbabwean, or is an Indian Zimbabwean, or is a Muslim Zimbabwean, or is a Hindu Zimbabwean. All of those other cultures and minority groups that are not part of the major political and economic base in Zimbabwe. Once we recognize that and pull it together as a country, we'll get ahead. Once we have white Zimbabweans in British circles and in Australian and American circles beginning to love their country and desiring a place where they can express their business ideas and take over the globe, then we are talking about a new Zimbabwe. Right now, when we have a black ZANU-PF in power, which is a racist against white people, racist against other colors or other creeds, and even racist against Ndebeles like me. I'm experiencing a lot of racism in Zimbabwean politics because of my ethnicity. Tribalism is rife in ZANU-PF. They have tribalism for breakfast and racism for lunch and hatred for dinner. Because of that, we have to let them go and ensure that we bring forth and give birth to a Zimbabwe that is inclusive and that is tolerant of different cultures, different religions, and different orientations. It is important to bring this small but forgotten group of Zimbabweans, which is the whites and the Indians, who I really do believe have got a formidable force and power, both economically and politically, to steer ahead a Zimbabwe that is inclusive and successful and will be very competitive in the region and even in the globe. When the Rhodesian government recognized that the mining industry was not what they had imagined to be, they began to industrialize the nation of Rhodesia. Remember, it was Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi during that time. Industrialization in Southern Africa was one of the reasons why the British Royal Crown did not like. They wanted industrialization to be centered in Europe. And having an African country industrialized was a problem for them because they didn't want that competition, even though that competition came from fellow white people. So they would find other reasons. You know what they always do with sanctions? They always find reasons. They look at your weakness and give reasons for sanctions. But in reality, the sanctions was about their UDI, was about the industrialization of the nation, independence. That's what independence means. So if you want an independent Zimbabwe, there's a few people that you need to ask questions for. They will teach you some lessons. It is the white Rhodesians who are the pioneers of independence in Zimbabwe and succeeded in it, but only failed in the part of including the black majority that led to a war. And that war gave Britain, the superpower, an opportunity to give power to the black masses, but who were actually incompetent and inexperienced to run government, and therefore that's what led to the overall demise of the country. So wisdom will call that we need to get back as a country, not just to 1980, but go all the way to the 1960s, to the 1950s, to the 1940s, and see how we can propel this nation forward. Zimbabwe is not a kingdom, is a nation. Mtwakazi was a kingdom, but Rhodesia was not a kingdom, it's a nation. And the nation has got all different people who do not subscribe to the same values and cultures, but we do intersect in the values that matter for country. And the values that matter for country are those that define what a nation is. I do believe Ngobani, who is running to take over from Idim Nangagwa, who's running the country down, I do believe that this integrating of different cultures in the new Zimbabwe is what is going to propel our economy and make sure and help us to restructure, re-engineer our economy and our society, and will be second to none in this region. This region is becoming tumultuous, and they need to be a regional power which is stable and strong. And I do believe my administration, or Zimbabwe under my leadership in my administration, will be able to forge ahead a political and social and economic powerhouse in the region that is second to none. To reinvigorate the spirit of industrialization that the Rhodesian government had started in Bulawayo and in Salisbury. You do need to recognize that fact that also down south, the politics in South Africa is becoming troublesome and disintegrating, and the South African society is disintegrating, and if it is allowed to disintegrate any further, the region itself will fall into a dark abyss. Somebody will have to handle the affairs of the region. And I do believe that if the powers that be in Zimbabwe give me political power to run our affairs, we will be a dominant force that no one will be able to stand against. I sincerely believe that I am the right candidate to take our country forward. In the midst of all of this pain and tribulation and political violence and interference across political parties and political leadership, I do believe that I do have the mental capacity, the ability to carry the country forward. I may not have the experience that you are looking for, but that is where you come in. That is when inclusivity in surrounding yourself, just like Ford, who said he liked to surround himself with people who are more competent and more powerful or more educated than him. I do believe that in my administration, I will surround myself with people that are more competent than me in various fields so that we can achieve regional dominance and a global competitive position. But you do know that when you actually aim for that, you are competing with the whole world. Therefore, China, USA, Russia, Britain, all of us will be against us. Therefore, I need very clever British people who are willing to risk capital, even to risk their political capital, to try something new in Africa. That spirit that Cecil John Ross had when he left his little cottage and mother behind in England and went to explore Africa. Even in this century, there still is some British people who still love Africa, yet have got that adventurous spirit and simply being taxed too much in Britain and want to explore the world. Even in Florida, even in Washington, even in San Francisco, perhaps in Texas, and somewhere in New York, there is wild hearts that want to explore Africa. And they want a piece of the pie of something that is growing and it's going to be great and amazing. I am not naive to think that our independence as Black Zimbabweans will just be focused on us, on our culture, on our color only. We don't like each other. We've got a plethora of problems, relational problems that will impede on growth and make it so difficult for the country to move forward. Injecting foreign blood in our economy is what will stabilize the country. Injecting foreign ideas, multiple culturalism is what we need to counter this monopoly of one culture, this monopoly of one tribe. When they do not have any competition, the West tends to come out of them. But with competition and other people are different from them, vanonyara, which means they are shy to do some of the most egregious things that they've done before. Idi Mnangagwa is able to steal the resources of the country because he's dealing with Shona and Ndebele people whom he disrespects. But if those resources are also shared by other people of other nationalities, by some Americans, some British, some white people, some Indian people, some people who speak languages that they don't understand, he might actually think twice before he robs some people, but that may potentially have political links in other countries. So from that position, it is important for me to invite foreigners, expatriates, to come and build the new Zimbabwe with me. My name is Ngobani Zondo, and I believe that this message will find you in good spirits, and you will push ahead with me for the removal of the sitting president of Zimbabwe, President Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, who is nothing but a bully, and incompetent, and blatantly corrupt. We need to retire him to his farm. That's all. Have a great evening.